Hey guys, it's Bree. A couple of months ago, I made a video called the Unpopular Opinions tag, and I wanted to talk about something that I said in there because my life has taken kind of an interesting turn. Um, Not really, it's super tangential and interesting in a mundane way. Um, but I babysit a lot for a good friend of mine, and his son is 7. While his dad slowly introduces him to the Tolkien world, we have been reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as his bedtime story for about a month now. I'm there every other week or so, and we read for the hour before bed. And it's been interesting. If you have seen my Unpopular Opinions tag video, which I'll link down below, you will know that I'm not a C.S. Lewis fan. I read C.S. Lewis's Narnia books when I was probably about that same age, like 7 to 10. And when I went to college, I went to a Catholic university where we had a seminary program. Seminary is where young men go to train for the priesthood, to become Catholic priests. And of course, one of the major modern influences in Catholic thought and philosophy is in fact C.S. Lewis. And so after spending some time with these wonderful folk, who they really are very lovely, it gets a little bit to the point where the C.S. Lewis love wears you thin. And for me, the Chronicles of Narnia books as a kid were not fantastic. They were good, right, in the sense that I was able to read them and read them quickly and was, interested while I read them. But, they weren't my favorite books. And so just kind of after 4 years of being worn thin on C.S. Lewis, I kind of just instinctively reject everything about him. Again, it's just an overexposure that mostly just makes me not want to ever see his name on a book again. So when we decided to start reading the Chronicles of Narnia with my babysittee, I was interested to see not only his reaction, but mine. Because I thought it would be interesting to compare the kind of 7-year-old reaction to the Chronicles of Narnia and my adult reaction, and kind of cross-reference his experiences with the book with mine then and mine now. I realized how very little I remembered about C.S. Lewis's writing style. The book, by and large, was exactly the same way that I kind of remembered it plot-wise, but the storytelling I see now, or at least now that I think about it, I can recognize more clearly the influences that Lewis had in his writing style, and the influence he's had on others. He's a very break the fourth wall kind of author, so he writes as though he's talking directly to the reader, as though it's him telling the reader a bedtime story as opposed to me reading the bedtime story to a child. And so he'll say things like, "But you know, of course, that locking a wardrobe behind you is a bad idea." And while it's kind of a tired trope, I think, from an adult point of view, my babysittee loved it. He thought it was hilarious that there was this commentary involved. And it's interesting because, like I said, I see that element in a lot of books that I enjoy, like Terry Pratchett, for instance, occasionally in some Gaiman. Kat Valente will do this in her children's books where she addresses the reader directly and is kind of, the sarcastic narrator. And I thought that was really interesting that was something he employed, especially because it's something he employed but I didn't remember. The plot itself, I think, I remember it feeling a lot more complicated. And I think that, that's gotta just be an adult thing, right? Now I read books that are 1,000 different plot lines going on at once. And comparatively, the Chronicles of Narnia is very straightforward. I remember it being much scarier than I thought. That was one of my trepidations when we picked it out for a bedtime story, is that it was going to be too scary to read at night. My baby Sati is a very imaginative kid, and he freaks out really easily, and at weird stuff too. I one time told him an abbreviated version of the Odyssey, and he was super freaked out by the Lotus Eaters. He got through the Cyclops fine, but the Lotus Eaters freaked him out. He got through most of the book okay. We only had to kind of stop and take a break for one part where the Pevensey children are following a robin to the beaver's house, and he didn't know where the robin was taking them, and so he, I think, got a little panicked. He made it through the the battle scenes okay, and the sacrifice scene okay. We did kind of, I breathed over it a little bit, skipping over some of the more gruesome adjectives. I think he was much more scared of it than I was. The tension, I think, was much more palpable to a 7-year-old mind, which makes sense because it's a kid's book. And the thing that struck me, and probably because I didn't realize when I was 7 that it was an allegory for the death and resurrection of Christ. I didn't realize that. Despite the fact that we went to Sunday school all the time and everyone around me was reading C.S. Lewis. Nobody had said, hey, doesn't this remind you of Jesus? Or, hey, did you know C.S. Lewis, was really into theology? I think the extent of it is after I had read C.S. Lewis when I was about 12 or 13. I had started reading the Lord of the Rings series, and my mother had mentioned that C.S. Lewis went to Sunday school with Tolkien or something like that. And that was really the extent I knew about C.S. Lewis's theological reputation. Looking back, it is very clearly a story about the death and rebirth of Jesus. I didn't think twice about him calling the Pevensey children the sons of Adam and the daughters of Eve. That to me was it rolled off my back. I just didn't realize. And it was interesting when I talked to my baby Sati. I said to him, did you think Aslan was going to come back? And he said, well, I don't know, but I wasn't thinking about him going to heaven, right? He's such a sweet kid that's what he would think of when he reads about a character dying. But he was like, I knew something was kind of up, but I thought maybe he was actually dead, and maybe he was going to come back as a ghost. He was like giving me this detailed explanation. But it all boiled down to when he died, I didn't think he was going to heaven. Not that he thought, of course, that Aslan was going to hell, but just that was not the end destination. That was not the end of Aslan's story. And I thought that was interesting because there's a subtlety in the story as a children's story, in that I think young children don't recognize the story for what it is exactly, unless you point it out. So that was interesting. Again, he was into it. He thought it was like laugh out loud funny and was talking to the book. I think he liked it a lot more than I did as a child. But it was an interesting contrast to see. I came out of it feeling like, it's still kind of a meh book. And I think at this point in my life, I'm a little allegoried out. But it was an interesting thing to have the opportunity to reread, especially to reread it to a child as opposed to rereading on my own. A lot of times when I reread stories that I read as a child, I'm doing it by myself and kind of, I don't have that framework of this is a child's response to the story as opposed to just an adult's. So it was a really interesting experience. Again, I'm still, I think, suffering from C.S. Lewis inundation. It wasn't as, it was fun to see him react to the story. Much more than it was to actually read it. I think it was much more enjoyable to see the response of an imaginative 7-year-old. So there you go. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on C.S. Lewis and the Chronicles of Narnia. I'd be really interested to hear if you have any thoughts on good short story books or good children's books that I could bring for bedtime stories so I don't have to read the rest of the Narnia books. Anyways, I hope you're having a fantastic reading week. I'll talk to you later. Bye.